start with a talk about one team to lead them all from Janne Sinivirta from Nitor.
Thank you. Nice to have so many of you here. I've been writing code as my day job for the past 17 years. In the good old days of Agile waterfall, I would typically receive my projects with a fixed scope, fixed time, and a fixed price. Things have moved on then. We have Agile. Everything is better now. So now I receive my projects typically with a fixed scope, fixed time, fixed price, and a fine print saying, please be agile. For many years, I have been very fortunate to get to work with skilled people and well-working teams. Unfortunately, the way that organizations go into Agile seems to still often be the way that let's do Agile, meaning you developers do Agile, and then yay, we are Agile. As long as the single part that is Agile still has to work with all the rest of the parts that still expect them to behave in the traditional way, the gains that we get are very limited. The way that projects are sold and bought is only one of the problems I see in these organizations. There's a lot of wasteful things that we spend our time on, pointless meetings that don't seem to go anywhere, painful handovers because every function is split into a different owner or different team, documents that have to be written but are really never read. Confluence is full of things that are put there just to die. And certain project thinking that challenges the advantages that we could get by limiting our interests in working for the greater good rather than just doing what is best for the short project. But the number one waste, I think, is still that we build things that nobody wants. There is nothing so useless than doing efficiently that which should not be done at all, said Peter Drucker. This brings me to think that there has to be a better way. There's a lot of stories of successful companies that have completely changed the way they do financial planning, systems architecture, portfolio management, and so on to radically improve their performance. This as whole is often referred to as lean enterprise. There's no clean definition for it, but I'll still ask the question, what is lean enterprise? I think every good lean consultant needs to have their own house of lean. This is courtesy of well-known lean talker and a colleague of mine, Teemu Toivonen. He builds his house on the foundation of respect for people, leading people by developing people and the lean system. The three pillars of lean system processes: systematic continuous improvement, sharing knowledge and developing skills, and tops it off with a vision that is clear, inspiring, and connected to daily work. This is all well and good, but what does it really mean? Let me put it another way. My hopes for a well-working lean organization is generally good dialogue, good two-way communication between all parties, the capability of the company to change the way they do business and make decisions based on changes in the marketplace, and capability of doing that fast, not with the lead time of 1.5 years, like Cosco said. Doing it with validated learning instead of market analysis and a lot of guesswork. Their capability of offering the workers a sense of purpose, that the stuff they do is meaningful for them, that even though they think they are doing well, they all know and accept the fact that they could always be better. And of course, very little of the aforementioned forms of waste. Now, the problem is, for me and a lot of developers working in teams, is that radically changing the way that company works requires the acceptance or okay from the senior middle management, which brings me to wonder that what should an average developer do then? Just go in the corner and cry? I don't think so. The principles of lean startup, for example, can be applied to whole different set of activities all around the organization, and many of these are in the reach of the development teams also. I'll go through a few of these. First one is validated learning. Microsoft's advanced research team, and whatever you think about Microsoft, you can guess that they have the means to hire pretty smart people in their advanced research team. They published their findings on the stuff that they had. Well, they suggest changes to their products, and of course they think each suggestion is an awesome one. 1/3 of those features receives negative feedback from the big audience. 1/3 receives positive feedback, and 1/3 negative, neutral feedback. So our capability as professionals to guess what will eventually be embraced by the bigger audience means absolutely nothing. So how do we change this into something positive? We aim to get real feedback from real users. I think the first step is that in the context of software development, which is pretty much always non-trivial features, we should stop using the word requirements, because we have hypotheses, and we should treat them like that. Otherwise, whose requirement? Who really requires this? Well, not the end user. This brings me to the concept of MVPs, or minimum viable products. In most enterprises, 30 to 50% of the total time to market is spent on activities that bring almost zero value to risk mitigation or the end users' outcomes. Minimum viable product can be a misleading term. One company I worked with had a long planning phase with UX guys. They came up with a bunch of well-defined features. Then they let the UX guys go, hired a bunch of developers, gave them the features that they must have, and called it an MVP, which it definitely isn't. It is an experiment designed to get maximize learning from real users with minimum effort. So it should be the first step you do in your design phase, not the first step in your implementation phase. It should be a cheap alternative to a lot of market research and a lot of guesswork and a lot of upfront planning. How this relates to developers and development teams is that their capabilities matter a lot. In many organizations, getting software into a production-like environment still takes days or even weeks. Despite its name, continuous delivery is not about taking software into production many times a day. Its goal is to make it economic and safe to work in small batches. This allows us to get faster feedback from real customers, and as a motto for development teams, if it's painful, do it more often. This is so fundamentally changing in the capabilities that many of the concepts introduced in scaling agile frameworks like agile trains and releasing in cadence, most of those I think lose their meaning when or they are reserved for environments where people and teams are unable to reach continuous deployment. This kind of experimentation, which is made possible by the continuous delivery capabilities of the team, requires that designers, engineers, the product people, the UX guys work together in very short iterations. This is extremely hard to do when any of these functions are outsourced, and it's only marginally easier when they are local or internal and still needs a lot of coordination. When you have a chance to affect the team compositions, I encourage you to include as many types of people as possible. So make the testers, make the product designers, make the UX guys part of your team to make the short iteration collaboratively possible. Another thing that I think makes working in small batches a little easier. One of the projects I started in a situation where, besides myself, I had one developer, 4 product owners, around 30 stakeholders, and you can imagine how easily this could change into screaming match, or what you call HIPPO, meaning highest paid person's opinion. So the boss gets to decide what is important. And there we used instead cost of delay divided by duration, or more precisely the saves shortest job first, but the idea is basically the same. It changes the game in that you encourage or force the stakeholders and the product owners to kind of sell the features to you, meaning that they have to justify what's the business they expect this to bring, or what's the penalty of not getting this in time. Then you give a very coarse estimate of the duration and prioritize based on that value. Besides kind of challenging their opinion on their favorite feature by making them estimate its value, this also encourages them to ask for smaller features, meaning smaller batches, because it's divided by the estimated duration. So the smaller you make the feature, the higher it climbs in the priority list. This also, of course, suits very well together with the continuous deployment capabilities. Continuous improvement is something that must be familiar to all, but unfortunately very many think it as sufficient that teams hold retrospectives and then we're doing continuous improvement. Yay. First thing that you should consider is the process you're using. If we achieve results by ignoring our process, we can't really improve the process. And if we don't improve the process, we cannot repeatedly achieve better results. And organizations that put in place strict processes that everybody is required to follow, and then in an emergency, nobody cares about them, fail on both of those accounts. The other thing that retrospectives can easily do is local optimizations. So if the team doesn't have the visibility to the whole value chain, but focuses on its problems solely, they can optimize themselves to be hyper productive in a value chain that is far from it, and this usually brings more frustration than actual gains. Understanding value, I admit it that as an arrogant architect, I used to easily fall into the trap of thinking that value is what I write as code, and nothing else is really, bringing value in this. But drawing out the pieces you have to work with, like the operations people, like the help desks, like the business people, and so on, and really taking a closer look, what is the value for the end user that each of these functions brings, and could we make it easier for these other functions also to produce value instead of focusing on what we think is valuable, is well worth the effort. Measuring improvement of your, or measuring the outcomes of your improvement work is a challenge also. I would encourage you to make the pain points visible and measurable, like measuring cycle times, measuring the time that the team spends on bug fixing or redoing stuff because, well, it wasn't quite what the business owner wanted, and so on. Makes it easier to track if you're actually making any improvement in your Kaizen. Also pay attention to the handovers, because that's usually where most of the waste is happening, not the well-working team's internal process. I have a favorite comparison between nerds and special ops, army special ops people, and not only because I get to compare myself to special ops, but different from most of the army, which is micromanaged. The special ops people, when they're dropped into far behind enemy lines or whatever, we expect everything to go wrong, right? So how do they actually manage to get sensible work done? I think it's mainly because they have been told the bigger vision in what they are supposed to aid. So even if their original plan is completely ruined, highly skilled and trained people can maneuver towards the right goal, the right vision, because they have been told that, unlike most of the soldiers which get micromanaged small, do this, move here, don't question anyone. Very often the vision is lost somewhere in the chain of command before it would reach the development team. I think there is things you can do in basically just going after it. And if it turns out that the only vision that really exists is printed on the lunch papers, then I'm sorry for you. But the other thing is that where possible, you should encourage a format of getting rid of epics and high level. We want to do this type of things, and instead focusing on goals. So why hire skilled people in what they do and then tell them exactly what to do? Rather set goals and tell them the real goals in what you want to achieve, and then let them find the best solution for that. Impact mapping, putting it shortly, is a way of setting goals and then finding out people that are capable of affecting that goal, and then delivering that goal to them instead of writing epics and passing it the exact requirements to them. All right, so let's say that now your own home base is clean, meaning you are capable of delivering short batches quickly to a production-like environment. The rest of the stuff is basically working with the organization, the other people. This I've used before, but well, it's not an encouraging site when you think about that's what Google offers when you search for My Manager. I think using the word organization is a cop-out, usually used to say, well, I would do my job better, but the organization doesn't allow me. And there's really no organization, there's just other people. So go find the people, meet the people, you might enjoy that, and even if you don't, it's much easier to question the decisions that restrict your work or your team if you know the reasons behind them and the people behind them. I think too often when we talk about scaling Agile, we talk about more teams, tribes, whatever you call it, horizontal scaling, basically. And as long as even the single team can't reach the whole value chain of working collaboratively from boss down to the end user, much of this horizontal scaling makes absolutely no sense. So I encourage you to reach beyond your team, bring as many of the stakeholders or DevOps people or whatever to the same room or the same floor as you can. Use an extended Kanban board. I have a picture soon. I think definitions of done in that context should be for everyone, not just the team members. Here's our current board, and the teams part really is there, and the rest is pre-work for product owners, stakeholders, ops people, and so on. So trying to use that to visualize the flow of value of concepts of work through a longer chain, through the whole value stream if possible, instead of just the team. This also is an easy way to encourage people to visit your development team and gradually make them feel a part of it. Enterprise architecture. Oh. Well, I could spend a whole hour just bashing on the sad state of enterprise architecture, the way I see it in many organizations. In perfect world, it's something that should enable businesses to work better, and it should enable development teams to do their work better. Instead, it's typically something that restricts the way businesses can operate, and it restricts the way development teams work. I've had varying degrees. I love the idea originally from Hewlett-Packard of managing by wandering around, meaning that they are not in their ivory towers, but the managers actually, walk among the workers, and if there's a problem, they ask how can I help, and that should be the attitude of enterprise architects, not creating policies and enforcing restrictions, but actively working with the teams, finding common solutions, helping to pass information between them, and so on. But, well, I've set up in previous customers meetings between regular meetings of the lead developers of each team and the enterprise architects. And I think it's a good idea, but it also takes people skills, because if, for example, the enterprise architects are not really interested in helping your daily details, they rather be in their closet drawing more UMLs, then the developers very soon lose interest in coming to these meetings. So somehow you should encourage the change of attitude from masters to servants among the enterprise architects. All right, so as you figured by this time, it's, as always, a lot about people skills. The guy who writes Coding Horror had a nice tweet about him getting into computers and computer science because he didn't really want to be to work with people. And now he's realized that it's all about the people, and that's some bullshit. But this is a Pandora's box and endless journey of learning. I don't claim to be a specialist in people skills in any way, but I'll give you a few pointers to think about few things that have been an aha moments for me. The first one comes from a friend of mine, Riina Hellström, who gave an excellent talk at last year's Turku Agile Day on why is it painful to introduce Agile, why is it painful for managers. David Rock has this SCARF model, which basically says that, well, human beings are super social. They feel social pain, like losing status or losing autonomy, the same way that they feel physical pain. And these are 5 categories that we actively, when our brain is in a kind of idle state, we constantly measure our position among the people we work or are in the same room with, and so on. And if you think about these categories, when you introduce Agile to a team, I think their status will go up, the certainty they feel about their work will go up, their autonomy definitely goes up, the relatedness when doing pair programming, when sharing, and the transparency it brings and so on, makes the relatedness and fairness go up. But if you think George, 55 years old, who's been climbing the corporate ladder for past 20 years, and now is introduced to Agile, pretty much each and every category, well, relatedness, if he feels alienated by these people talking about Agile, then even that goes down, but the rest will definitely go down. And that will cause a lot of stress, and stress causes the person to be unable to think logically, to find a route out, and this will cause a definite pushback. So for me, until that time, I have always felt that, well, I've been pretty aggressive in bringing Agile, and always thought that, why can't you understand that this is so awesome, everything is better after this, and after hearing this, it makes a lot of sense that before they actually see how it works and find their own place in that and don't feel threatened, it is a big problem for them. So same way as beyond budgeting or things like this, you can't really, just push them in. You have to bring them gradually and think about, how these types of social well-being are affected when you try to push a change in your organization. Here's a book cover that, if I've ever seen a self-help book, this is the one. You have your PhD there, you have your flowers and planets there, really fucking cheesy language of life subtitle. But despite the ugly cover, it's an excellent book on communication skills and has been battle tested in things that are way more challenging than your average corporate ladders, like warfare zones, tribal conflicts in Africa, gang-related problems in USA, and so on. The key takeaway for me from that book, which I encourage you to read, was that behind every lash out or angry comment or something nasty that is said to you is a need that doesn't get fulfilled. And if you can ignore the insult and instead figure out what's the need that is not getting fulfilled and causes him to react that way, you're much faster to find a solution that works for both of you. So, as a summary, even though you might think lean as something that is aimed to just cut costs and usually led by bosses that have found a new buzzword, I think lean is a worker-led activity, and the teams have a lot that they can do in there. I think scaling agile is first about including the whole value chain before you start to include more developers. I think there's tremendous value in enabling experimentation, where in short cycles you can bring new things into production and see if they actually receive positive feedback, instead of letting the manager grow their beautiful idea of the next awesome feature and then have to tell him that your dear baby is ugly one. And in the end, build trust, be transparent, and win the whole organization. Thank you.